Hello and welcome to Breakfast All Day. I'm Matt. That's Alonso. That's Christy. If you lived in Los Angeles in the 80s, you might have known Sparks. I myself have 3 or 4 albums, Angst in My Pants, music that you can dance to. They are not somebody who ever made it huge, though. There is a new documentary out from director Edgar Wright. I almost said Robin Wright. And
she's the director too now,
right? And I believe Alonso, you're going to describe the movie. I haven't had a chance to see it yet because I overslept this morning and wanted to see it. But they'll tell you all about it.
Yeah. So the Sparks Brothers takes on a pretty Herculean task. This is a band that's been around for 50 years and has put out 25 albums, and the movie gives us a snapshot of all 25 of those albums. Also talking to to Ron and Russell, the brothers who are the Sparks, the Mael brothers, and then you've also got an incredible ensemble of co-workers and collaborators and fans. You know, I was joking with Dave, this is the one movie where you're going to see Thurston Moore and Nick Hayward like wax effusively over the same music. But yeah, so these guys started in the late 60s. You know, they were raised in Southern California, and over the course of 5 decades, they have experimented with different sounds, and they've kind of played around with genres, and they've worked with everybody from Todd Rundgren to Giorgio Moroder to Franz Ferdinand, and they are like as they're often described as the biggest band you've never heard of, because you are either like, for the most part, it would appear you're either super hardcore in the tank for Sparks and you like adore them, or you have never heard of them at all. Like I barely knew them going into this. I knew Angst in My Pants, Cool Places, and Number One Song in Heaven. But what this does, what the best music documentaries does, which is you leave either wanting to go buy a bunch of their records, or at least understanding why the people who are into them are into them. And that's a hard thing to explain sometimes. And Wright, I think, as a fan, is doing a pretty good job of sort of like taking us through. It doesn't do the sort of VH1 behind the music thing where like, oh, then they blew all their money on cocaine and then they like went and lived in Arizona in an ashram for 2 years. Like these guys have these very sort of stable lives. We don't learn much about their personal lives, but we do learn that like at one point they took 5 or 6 years off recording and they lived off their savings. Who in rock and roll has savings, So it's a really fascinating portrait. And again, you can go in not knowing anything about Sparks, and even if you leave not wanting to buy their albums, it's just a really well put together documentary. It moves at a great pace. The brothers are fun and funny, and the people who pop up to extol them run a wide gamut. You've got Patton Oswalt and Amy Sherman Palladino and all these other people, and it's a cool sort of snapshot of this extraordinary pop culture phenomenon.
Yeah, the thing that Matt said is something that Weird Al Yankovic says in this movie, which is if you lived in LA in the 80s, you thought the Sparks were the biggest band on the planet, because it's something that Amy Sherman Palladino says, which is that they played him on K-Rock a lot.
Right.
So I'm a little younger than Matt, not much, but I'm a little younger than Matt, but I recall at age 10 and was just starting to listen to K-Rock in like 1982, 83. And I always thought they were British because they have sort of like a European and kind of like an other kind of foreign sensibility about them because they're just so freaking weird. But also
and they were
because
popular in Britain.
And that's where they became popular before coming back to the US again. But I conflate them with all those bands that were played on K-Rock in the 80s, like Depeche Mode and The Cure,
The Buggles,
and Duran Duran, and who else did they mention in this? Yeah, and like Nick Rhodes and John Taylor from Duran Duran are in this.
Right.
So the people who found themselves influenced by Sparks are all over the place. Yeah, Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth, and then like people from Duran Duran. And then I love the stuff from Jack Antonoff in here, how he looks at them from a producing perspective,
right,
and how he is wowed by the choices that they make, and how he's like, I'm a dumbass, I'd probably do this, but they chose this and it's clearly so much better. This is 2 hours and 20 minutes long. It is very, very entertaining. It moves very well. At the end of it, though, I walked away feeling like I didn't really learn that much about them as people, because as you point out, Alonso, we don't learn anything about their personal lives. And this is not so different from so many documentaries that we've seen recently about musicians, about bands, where like you get the access, but maybe you also have to guarantee a soft touch.
I mean, I guess if it turns out that there's some scandal that is being, buried here, then I agree. But I to me, it just kind of felt like these guys are so sort of singular and weird, and people are always so kind of vague about like, are they British? Are they American? What's their deal? Yeah. I sort of admired the fact that like, what if we just like, we have 25 records to do here. So we can't get into like puppies and girlfriends. I don't know. I sort of admired the idea that like, we're just going to look at this as the culture part, the music itself, the creation of these records, the people that these records inspired, and so I don't know. I mean, yeah, to me, it felt like, I think if we had been given these sort of doting, at home with their loving wife moments, then that would have felt like, okay, what are we being sold here? But the fact that they just don't go there at all, to me, felt like a more deliberate choice of like, the part of what's cool about this band is the sort of odd enigma around them, and who the hell are these guys and where do they come from, and I want to keep that inviolate. That was sort of the impression I got of what Wright wanted to do. And so I'm like, all right, I'm fine with sacrificing personal stuff if it's just going to be more talking about the actual records, and we're going to, because the thing that annoys me in docs like this so often is like, in the Bee Gees thing, how are we not talking about the Sgt. Pepper movie? That was huge. That record was huge. It was a giant debacle. Like, they surely have things to say about it, and it's just not there. And so I think if you were a hardcore Sparks fan and they left out some of the less successful albums, you might be like, well, I would like to hear what they have to say about it. And so you hear what they say about all 25 of those records. And so I don't know. I think it's a fair trade, but I see your point where it could be occluding something more interesting. And
they are really coy about that. They are very aware about the fact that this movie, maintains their enigmatic status, because, there's a thing that they do at the end where they, offer some fun facts, which are pointedly not facts, and that's part of the fun of them. The only thing we get close to as far as knowing anything about their private lives is, when Russell was involved with Jane Whelan, right around the time that they did Cool Places. I listened to them a lot back then. I liked the whole Angst in My Pants album. They did not mention in all of their film ramblings here, because they both love film and then have come close to making a couple of movies prior to Jacques Tati. But they didn't mention that like 2 of the Angst in My Pants songs are in Valley Girl.
Oh, they do mention Roller Coaster though.
Roller Coaster, yeah. And I like the Jason Schwartzman insight into that too. It's really entertaining. So it's not like the Pink documentary where it's just like, wow, let's go behind the scenes with Pink and isn't she awesome all the time? Although even in framing their failures and even in framing their struggles, it's still through the prism of like, wow, they're amazing genius artists and like not everybody got them. Like, that is the most warts and all thing that there is to be said here. So this is a very loving tribute to them, and there's access to them. And maybe the flip side of it is like, Edgar Wright doesn't ask any pointed questions whatsoever.
That's fair. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's a fan doc, but if the fan is Edgar Wright, then, he's going to make a better movie than another fan might.
And he even chirons himself when he's on camera. He writes Edgar Wright, fanboy. And that's kind of cute too. So I mean, my number is a 7.2. I really enjoyed it, but felt like things were missing.
That's fair. I maybe went a little high. I'll say an 8.8. So that brings us to an 8. I think it's terrific. And again, like, I love seeing docs about things that I don't know anything about. Like, I always find that really illuminating. And so I had such a sketchy notion of who or what Sparks even was, that I at least feel like I came away with like, all right, I get their history. Maybe I'm not going to run out and buy all the records, but I understand why these musicians that I love them so much, and how their work then inspired these other people to do their work, Oh,
and I love that they're so weird and so singular, given that like they grew up in LA surfing. Like Russell was like a quarterback in high school. And so for them to go from like Beach Boys, Southern California culture to this totally weird, avant-garde, challenging stuff. Anyway, and I like the whole story rather about how music that you can dance to came about. That's very funny. There's a lot of really great anecdotes. It's a funny movie.
Yeah. So it's on Hulu, you say?
It's on Hulu.
Nice.
Streaming.
Okay, cool. So yeah, do check that out. And thanks for watching. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us at BeFastAllDay on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And why not check out our Patreon at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. I do too many shows. We are talking about Loki. We'll be soon talking about Ted Lasso season 2. And we're currently taking votes from our subscribers about which Richard Donner classic we're going to be talking about later this month. So lots of fun stuff going on over there. Be well. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.